Square Enix are down $2 billion since Final Fantasy XVI's release in June, but Final Fantasy XVI is not the reason why Square Enix are on their last legs yet again. I've got a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk about here, and I'm probably going to rant my arse off for a bit, because I'm a huge Square Enix fan, or at least I have been for the majority of my life, and I can't believe they're in this much of a hole. Yes, this happened before with a little disaster you might remember called Marvel's Avengers. A cash grab slot machine per character battle pass cluster that bombed at launch, overcharged for DLC, then flagged that it was going to be taken offline altogether September 30th this year. This is the reason Square Enix are dying. Boneheaded, anti-consumer, ridiculous moves that someone at the top thought everybody would embrace, but instead the amount of money riding on them only means that they get worse and worse the more they keep steering in this direction. I'll get back to Final Fantasy XVI because its sales didn't light the world on fire, but the problem is far, far bigger. Firstly, NFTs. Remember them? Back at the start of 2022, then president of Square Enix, Yosuke Matsuda, said that NFTs and the blockchain were the future. He's been replaced now, so it didn't do very well for him at all. Square Enix are still all in on the NFT games that he started though. We have two of them, Symbiogenesis and something else called Million Arthur, the latter being a 5 to 10 year project. How the hell that's even gonna... A 5 to 10 year project that apparently is going to try and sell you NFTs and constant monetizable aspects for the next half to a full decade. There's no way that's going to work. As I say that, I know it's not going to work. Next up, we need to talk about Final Fantasy VII, the cottage industry that is Final Fantasy VII within Square Enix. Final Fantasy VII has been turned into a battle royale, Final Fantasy VII First Soldier launching in November 2021 and then going offline January 2023 because no one wants to play a third-person shooter Final Fantasy battle royale. The most recent thing that Square Enix have done with the Final Fantasy VII IP is releasing Ever Crisis, something that was supposed to be another chance for a remake and very much looked like they were taking the PlayStation 1 original game and reskinning it, kind of just bringing the mechanics, the turn-based stuff in that original game, reskinning it, making it work for a new audience and putting that out. Instead, it is a gacha style game where you're paying real money to respin certain battles to get better weapons, better items, to fight bosses that just wiped you out in one turn. They've literally gone back to the original Final Fantasy VII plus Crisis Core and then separated all those different battles out. You can get through the story chapters without having to pay too much money, at least I have been able to so far. I refuse to give them any money for this thing, but I was curious how the story side of things play out. It just means that you're getting a truncated version of both of those games, whilst the game itself pushes various dungeons, various challenges on you that you just get wiped out inside because they then want to push you towards the premium currency to encourage you to do various loot box style spinner games to get a better version of Cloud's Buster Sword or Barrett's minigun or Aerith's staff or whatever. Every single aspect of this thing outside of those direct story chapters, which in themselves can be affected by the monetization elements, is just gacha AF. They're just trying to monetize every individual little portion of this thing, and it sets a horrible precedent for Square Enix overall. I hope they don't do this with Dragon Quest VIII or any of their other beloved RPGs. Ever Crisis is an absolute abomination, an absolute mess of a thing that kind of feels like it started out as a genuine remake of the original game, maybe the retexture that they were potentially going to do before it became this overall remake trilogy that we're going to get, where every individual installment costs multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. But what we have right now is a gacha infused monetization mess that I guarantee isn't going to last longer than another year or so. Speaking of the remake, I honestly don't even know if we're going to get part 3. There was the whole thing when the Final Fantasy VII Remake project was coming around where Square Enix was saying we don't know how many installments we're going to do, which was very much corpo speak for we don't know how long we can stretch this out for. If we can get you guys to pay for 10 installments, we're going to do that. However, over time it got refined down to a trilogy, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is coming next year, 2024, and we do have the first part of that chapter already. However, it was telling at launch with Final Fantasy VII Remake in 2020 that a lot of people didn't realize they were only getting the first, like fifth of the game. Like I said, it's going to be a trilogy overall, but if you talk about the piece of the original that they siphoned off to make the remake, that's about a fifth or a tenth of the whole game. The way that they've strung this thing out and the dire financial situation that they're in, the fact that they are once again leaning on Final Fantasy VII's remake as a way to recoup funds overall, just makes me very worried about the way this trilogy is going to be rolling out, whether you can maintain a set of staff across the entire trilogy, whether you can make it feel worthwhile overall. I just don't feel good about any of it. Speaking of Final Fantasy, Chocobo Racing was given a sequel on Switch, some 20 plus years after fans fell in love with the PlayStation 1 original. Nostalgia was up for grabs yet again though, and that meant more monetization. Chocobo GP launched with some of the worst premium currency monetization in Square's own history. It was overpriced at launch in March 2022, bombed hard, Square Enix abandoned it in December that same year, and a version with all monetization removed launched in June 2023 for the 5 people left who fancied playing something other than a slot machine. I remember picking this thing up. I was like, I like Chocobo Racing on PS1. I'll give this a quick shot. You can play as Cloud. Of course you can. You can have some fun with Final Fantasy characters, and you'll just hit up front with the various monetization elements immediately. The premium currencies, the rotating ways that they put different slot machine aspects on screen. It felt horrible. Like I said, there is a better version of it available now, but it took Square Enix about a year to realize that nobody wanted anything to do with that original version. Next up, the absolute lack of marketing for anything other than AAA titles. It infuriates me that the likes of Triangle Strategy, Octopath Traveler 2 just do not get marketing campaigns whatsoever. Maybe your friend who likes RPGs has heard of them, but they're nowhere near the same level as a Final Fantasy VII Remake or a Forspoken or whatever. And I'm going to get to Forspoken in a bit. Square Enix's other output, away from the Final Fantasy VII Battle Royales and the Forspokens, is their best stuff, but you wouldn't know it because the marketing for these titles is next to zero. Octopath Traveler 2, one of the best JRPGs of all time, easily next to zero marketing. Triangle Strategy, an incredible Game of Thrones meets Fire Emblem grid-based strategy where even the demo gives you more than 10 hours for free, zero marketing. Theatrhythm Final Barline, a phenomenal rhythm game where you play through the entire Final Fantasy series history of music, complete with a fun party builder and loads of Easter eggs, zero marketing. Outside of this, you've got Various Daylife and the Diofield Chronicle dropping on top of each other in September 2022, and Harvestella arriving in November just after. All of which totally buried Tactics Ogre Reborn, but I would say that the ridiculous price point had a big hand in that as well. On to Forspoken. Honestly, when we talk about Forspoken, I'm one of the 7 people who picked that thing up because I just had to know how it played. The whole opening of that game, totally solid. Ella Balinska is an incredible actress, and props to her working with the horrific material that she was given. I think she did the best that she possibly could. I do think those various lines, obviously there's the whole thing, I'm talking to a cuff, all the memes, all that stuff. Trust me, it works in context. She's a character who's never seen anything other than a very squalid life at that point, and I kind of bought, largely through her performance, that that character would be that overjoyed in quite an innocent, quite childlike kind of way, you know, at that moment in the story. I'm just saying that because no one's ever going to stick up for Forspoken, nor should they, beyond the intro, but I've played the game, I spent the time, I want to say some stuff. The real issue with Forspoken was developmental and managerial. It saw multiple heavy rewrites, removing whatever authorship was present from Gary Whitta and Amy Hennig of Star Wars Rogue One and Uncharted/Legacy of Kain fame respectively, leaving an overly polished smush of a game that some corporate think tank convinced themselves the kids would love, but instead it went alongside Saints Row's reboot, Immortals of Avium's presentation, or anything else with this overly safe, saccharine approach to audience building that everyone is beyond sick of. Underneath all that, it did cost $100 million as well, and although Square Enix won't release official sales, even they said that sales were lackluster. There's no way that game made $100 million back. No one cares about a sequel, no one cares about the wider lore. It's a complete, utter failure. Speaking of sales, because yes, this just keeps going on, Square Enix are notorious for expecting far too much from any game's release and then getting annoyed when it doesn't make millions in return. They were unhappy with Deus Ex, Tomb Raider and Hitman, leading to all 3 being sold off. Deus Ex and Tomb Raider went to Embracer, and Hitman went back to developers IO Interactive themselves. The jury's out on what's happening with the first 2, but Hitman has become the single most impressive stealth game ever made, with an incredible community and franchise course correction that is entirely recommendable. I'm just saying that if Square Enix would get the hell out of their own way and just trust in the people making the games, stop trying to focus test everything to death, stop trying to make these over-the-top ridiculous business moves, it would probably work out better. You would have so many more irons in the fire, so many more smaller scale, less budgeted games with smaller productions and less demands, less ideas of how much money they need to make back, and that would sustain their bottom line. I'm not a business professional, I have no idea, but the way they're operating, it's only going to lead to more billions of dollars being lost. Lastly, Final Fantasy 16. Now, I loved this game, and thematically it is Final Fantasy. Environmentalism through and through, fighting for the planet, seeing giant summons battle it out, but gameplay-wise it's the biggest departure for a main installment yet, which is likely why 16 didn't sell big. It's worth pointing out here that Final Fantasy XVI did not bomb. It didn't sell incredibly well either. It was right down the line. We don't have any official numbers whatsoever, but we do have various analysts, various journalists, etc. saying that the game sold completely fine. It was just, yep, it sold fine enough. It wasn't a runaway success. It wasn't a bomb. It was just fine. It's weird to just kind of accept that when it's a Final Fantasy main installment, but it sold fine. Safe to say, between a huge financial success and an outright bomb, at this current state with Square Enix, they definitely needed the former. Why? Because Final Fantasy VII Remake bailed them out when the Avengers bet went sideways, and right now, some $2 billion down and with nothing on the horizon but more Final Fantasy VII, either history repeats or those rumors about Sony acquiring them come true instead. At least that's my thoughts on Square Enix in 2023. Having watched this weird train wreck suplex itself for the last decade or so, let me know what you think down in the comments below. I'll put a lovely Final Fantasy video right here for you, because like I said, I love Final Fantasy 16, and I did a whole video about how the thematics, the way the narrative's delivered, the way you play that game is genius. So check that out, let me know what you think, and I'll catch you very soon. I've been Scott from moreculture.com. I should have said that probably about half an hour ago. See you later.